Hi, welcome to Ask the Manager. We have someone that none of you know. Oh no, that's right. Moira Miller, who just retired from the Board of Selectmen in May.
Yes, that's correct.
And so you've had a few months to lay low, but it seems like you haven't because you're still a town meeting member.
That's correct.
In precinct
10.
And you are on the Town Center Committee?
Yes, Shrewsbury Town Center Association.
Oh, the association.
Yes, we're an association.
And you are on a subcommittee that seems to be getting very active.
Yes, well, we call ourselves the Yuletide Committee, but the committee was formed to basically to come up with some sort of an event in the town center that would sort of draw people there, cause some excitement. And we came up with this Yuletide Market, which for people who know, it's modeled off the European Christmas holiday markets. And it has, it's just come together very nicely. It'll be December 7th, 4 to 8 p.m. The property of Champa Funeral Home, that parking lot area. Very excited. We have artisan vendors and food trucks, and we have a Greater Good is our beer vendor, and we'll have hot mulled wine and lots of fun and activity. And then in conjunction with that, they're excited too because the Shrewsbury Town Center Association was able to raise funds to actually light the common for the holidays.
Oh.
So, still working out sort of all the details, but lighting some of the trees and some of the shrubs and different things around there to kind of have a wow factor. So it'll be the first time in Shrewsbury that the common's ever been lit because there was no electricity there to do that before. And we were able to raise funds for that. So it's very exciting. So Shrewsbury Town Center Association has really, in about a year and a half, been able to kind of get off the ground and get going. So I'm kind of glad to focus, have something to focus on in my retirement time.
So that's great. Now, at no expense to the town?
No expense to the town. Yep, raise the funds for to bring the conduits, the electricity to the common, so that lights could be done, and then again been able to raise the funds to actually have a company come in. We won't purchase lights and those things. We looked into all that. It's a big deal, but there are organizations that come in and just sort of do that work. They do it for towns and they do it for businesses and they do it for homes, and so so thank you to all our generous donors. It has been great.
Well, I look forward to it.
Yeah, so no expense to town. Kevin's happy.
That's why you're smiling.
That's the way. I was a selectman for 12 years. I knew enough. Yeah, we got to do this on our own. So
now we have to start with town meeting was over in record time. Special town meeting. We started. What did you say? It was 8:10.
I think it was actually 7:12 when we
7.
kicked off after announcements and other stuff that goes on. Yeah, it was about 7:12.
7:12, and we were done before 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I was in my nightgown by 8:10.
Yeah.
The 8:10 was on my mind,
Right.
all ready for the football game. So, but the business got done, and people still had the opportunity to ask all the questions they wanted, and they seemed to be well informed prior to this meeting. So. It wasn't real controversial.
No, not much. It was very much a business meeting. We made some changes to the budget, and one of the biggest changes in the budget was the budget went down, right? So that doesn't happen every time that we go to. So
I think people were just shocked. They didn't know what to say.
Speechless.
So we reduced funding by about $120,000 in total. Again, due to the good AAA bond rating and the reduction in the interest that we'll pay for the Beal project and the fire station, the remaining debt on the fire station. So through those two savings, over the next, 8 years for the fire station and 20 years for Beal, we'll save, over almost $4.1 million. So that's a good number. And through that same motion, even though we reduced spending, we are adding 4 firefighters, which will fill out some additional firefighters, improve our ability to respond and our capacity on scene whenever we have a working house fire.
But you also have a grant to start.
That's right.
With the 4 firefighters to help give it a boost to the budget.
Yep. So we provided our 25% match, and the federal government will pick up the other 75 for the first 2 years, and then the town will be responsible for 65% in the third year, and then 100% every year thereafter.
And that will bring us to how many firefighters?
36.
How many per shift?
So there'll be 4 at headquarters and 3 at one outlying station and 2 at the lake station.
So 9,
Yeah, 9
if I can
each
add
shift.
fast.
9, Yep.
So
9
Good.
each shift. Yeah, it's
Progress.
definitely helpful.
we're getting there.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, it is. Well, like I said, it's progress. It's a you know, it's that old 3-legged stool analogy that is used, maybe overused sometimes. But you know, we all know when it comes to what you do, what town government does, you're always trying to balance, and it can get tough, and it ties into a lot of this in terms of providing services. You've got, you know, the needs. You're balancing the needs of residents at any given time. Against the revenue, and then there's that third leg, which is regulation, and that's probably the biggest unknown that we have. And while, you know, as it comes to staffing, it maybe isn't a direct impact; it's indirect because, like, for example, town meeting, we talked about the water and the testing, and now as you so eloquently put it in response to a question that was asked of you. Every time it's tested, the science gets better and they find new things. So now we have a regulation and millions of dollars you didn't anticipate that has to go here.
Yep.
It's got to come from someplace.
Right.
So I think it's great that we've been able to do that, to add those 4 firefighters, and you know, continue to do it as you can do it.
Yep.
We've gone on for so long with tight budgets and trying to survive the drop in the economy and so forth, that it's exciting to see that we have money to do some of the things that we've wanted to do for many years. And at the same time, it's almost like, whoa, we really can spend that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, you're right. It's just like at home. Same thing,
Exactly.
right? You're like, oh, now I have it. Should I spend it? Or should I, you know? But yes, the answer is responsibly. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, it is scary, you know, because we are committing. You know, it's not a 1-year cost; it's a long-term cost.
Right.
So we're very cognizant of that. We do look at the finances and the revenue, and you know, each year we'll have to put a little bit more in for the firefighters, and then we'll, you know, have 100% of the cost. So it's a good way to work our way in from how our revenue model works incrementally. But everything in local government's increment. You know, there's no wholesale changes that all of a sudden we do something. You have to go 5 or 6 years and then look back to see what you actually did, because you don't see it as you're passing it by slowly.
So speaking of revenue, if I might jump in, do we have an update on the marijuana facility? I've seen the sign go up on Route 20, but haven't seen any activity, or Route 9? Or
Yeah, so Route 9 actually seems to be out ahead as far as the race at the Cannabis Control Commission goes. I signed off on their municipal notification beginning of this week, actually. So they're going to start their construction, but the Route 20 facility doesn't have that level of approval yet at the state. So it's interesting that they're fit out, ready to open, but they don't have what they need at the state, and the other one's just the opposite. So I'm hoping so we're not going to anticipate any revenue again, just because we won't have a good baseline to not shoot ourselves in the foot. And but hopefully in 2021 they'll be both open for the full year. That's, you know, I think that's reasonable at this point in time. And then 22 we can start to plan for that revenue moving forward. So again, nothing happens fast.
No, even if it's a case like this where we were able as a town to act and react pretty quickly, get our town meeting to approve and, you know, pass the regulations that need to be passed, and we were like one of the first communities to do that, thinking we would get in line fairly quickly. But here, you know, you're right. It just best laid plans.
And my question is, what communities around us are ahead of us?
On a community basis, there are retail shops open in Worcester. I don't know that any other adjacent community has a retail shop open. There's some dispensaries, I think, in Grafton, but there's no other retail shops open. So we still have I think, benefits still at this point in time, which is one of the reasons that we were on the accelerator going through last fall, was because the companies we working with were well capitalized and, you know, kind of the larger variety. I think maybe that may have one sticking up a little bit more than we anticipated, but yeah, so there's definitely progress, and should be opening in the near future.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, as kind of going back to Shrewsbury Town Center, if I could, because as Shrewsbury Town Center Association, I was very interested to watch the Selectmen's meeting the other night and see Bernie Cahill's presentation on the possible rezoning for the town center. And there's going to be a couple of forums, one November 19th and December 11th at the library. So I think it's been great how, I think, kudos to you, Kristen, and Bernie, and Chris McGoldrick, and everybody who's been working sort of systematically on getting grants and moving forward and doing things to study parking and other things in the town center, kind of, again, helping to move forward this sense of community there and pride and those things. So I think that this is an important discussion, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope people will participate. But specifically, I know, we talk a lot about millennials as a category, but whether the millennials or not, just how do we attract not only current residents to the town center, but in the whole community, getting the millennials when they're ready, and they can do it, to move back to Shrewsbury, because they look for things now that we don't have, like accessibility for walking and bike paths, as much as some of us go, please. But those things are what they want.
No, I think it's a challenge, but I think we do have that opportunity with the town center to, we may be looking at the zoning, but the interconnectivity of the neighborhoods, we actually have, there's a lot of density surrounding the immediate town center, so better connectivity and getting people to think a little bit differently will be just as important as looking at the footprint and how we zone things. I do think we need more housing opportunities, diverse housing opportunities throughout town. I think, our spectrum, what they called it, as far as the population goes, the Millennial Valley. We don't have a lot of that age group of the early 20s into the early 30s. So finding ways to get them to the community earlier. I think a lot of developments like Lakeway Common, they're attracted, Lakeway Commons and maybe Edgemere, they're developed, or they're attracted to those types of developments because they are walkable, there's public transportation. But we can create that same environment right in the center. And, One Maple Avenue, where the Beale School currently is, could be another aspect that bolsters what's going to happen in the town center. So, there's a lot of different parts and pieces, and we are still moving forward. We did the wayfinding signage study, and we're moving forward with some implementation there. So there is a lot of efforts, one step at a time with the town center.
I think there's a lot of, it seems to me the stars are starting to align a little bit. So there's been all this activity, but then you have what's happening in Worcester now, kind of a reemergence in the ballpark, and building, and they've got housing and apartments, so they're starting to now, upgrade sort of in that manner. That to me spills over to Shrewsbury. I think it always has, and I think it's been really good that this process is going. So I think it's saying, with the Beale School and everything, we'll have the components together and in place, so that hopefully when people are ready or they're looking in Shrewsbury, they're gonna say, hey, you know what? Yeah, they've got what I'm looking for. That would be great. That would be awesome.
It's a good point. Now, I rode through the center with my mother this week, and she looked at Beale School and asked if it was going to be knocked down. And I, explained that that's still up in the air, and
it is,
the future of that property is yet to be determined, and that we really can't do anything there until the Beale School, the new Beale School, is built. And so it still has, planning needs to take place, but yet there's plenty of time that we don't have to rush to make a good decision for that property.
Right. Yeah, we are working on the RFP document, request for proposal document, that we'll send out to the investment community and go through a competitive process once we are moving over to the new school in the fall of 2021. So we're working on that. So we have that in place. there may be some activity, if we're able to get a formal vote out of town meeting to be able to dispose of it when, pretty much contingent upon the opening of the new school. We may have that at the Springtown meeting. We have to work with the school committee on that. But yeah, it's lining up all those pieces, because where we want to be is the developer is closer to taking action on the property the day after we move out than us putting the RFP on the street the day after we move out. We don't want it to sit fallow for 2 years, as a developer
Right.
pulls plans together.
I think there are a lot of us that have high expectations for that property. And, when you think about what could go in there, I guess some of us could be disappointed if it's not something that does attract people to the center of town, that it's not a specific business with just, if you don't want to buy curtains there or something.
Right.
We're all waiting in anticipation of something that really excites us about the center of town.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's kind of like me every time a new auto dealer or storage place opens on Route 9. Thank goodness for those businesses; they're
Right,
needed. But
right.
I'm sort of like, all right, where's something?
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you do have high expectations, and I would hope that developers bidding on this will have some vision and understand.
Right.
Again, all these things we're talking about is what everybody's looking for. But
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about this process. Since the town owns the land, we can shape what it is that we want there. So if it was just a private-to-private transaction, the town doesn't have any role in it. But through the RFP process, we can say this will score higher than this. And it's not just, the financial aspect of the transaction is important, but just as important, especially given this time and the conversation we just had about the town center, getting the right what there is just as important as making a lot of money off of the financial aspect of the transaction.
And I have no idea what they'll do about parking when you talk about that. I
Well-
just can't even imagine how they will accomplish that.
parking is interesting because again, there was a town center. There was a study on parking, and what the study found was that there is a lot of parking in what is defined as the center. So not just the common, but out north, south, east, west to certain areas. It's just a lot of it is private and it's hidden. It's not easily accessible. Some of those businesses have already demonstrated that they're willing to let the public park off hours, So I think of the UMass Children's 140 on Main Street, that building, for example. Certainly the Congregational Church has always been, So it's kind of a matter of, I think, working with those businesses, approaching them, asking and working out arrangements where that might work. So I think it's there. We have to be creative about how we get people sort of around it. But I recently had the opportunity to sort of count spaces, and I was, yes, for Yuletide
Retired.
Market. Yeah, it's amazing what you'll do. And there are just hundreds and hundreds of parking spaces.
Really?
Yes.
You just drive past them, don't even notice.
You drive,
the
you
line
don't
anymore.
even think, and you don't go, you don't do like me, 1, 2, 3, 4. But they're there. It's just a matter of, and I would hope with whatever the new development is built, that some parking is included. But you're right. The other thing, the point that I was surprised at town meeting was the town meeting voted to accept $16,000 from the state. It's the percentage that we get for Uber and Lyft drivers. The number stunned me that in 2017, 2018, the revenue just in Shrewsbury for Uber Lyft was $160,000. So it's like $80,000 a year. Again, speaking to what people are doing, I had no idea.
Right.
I've used it once, but I had no idea there was
Never
that
used it.
much activity that we would get 16. It's
16,000. Yeah.
it's just money coming in,
Yep.
and that is specifically needs to be dedicated to things like looking at pedestrian,
Yep.
walking, bike paths, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But so that to me, we still think of parking in the old people are going to drive a car and park model, but a lot of people are now thinking differently. They Uber and they do these other things. So maybe parking isn't going to be as significant as we think in the future. I don't know, but.
For the immediate future, it will be.
It certainly is, yeah.
For our area.
Right.
There are other areas in the country where it's just
declining.
most common. So,
Yeah.
you know, over time, it probably will change. It's
Yeah.
just us having the foresight to anticipate what will come.
Yeah, and through the wayfinding signs, you know, so again, wayfinding can point people to parking, and can say, you know, it's a 5-minute walk from here
Right.
to Willie's Steakhouse, to, you know,
Right.
the library, to, you know, wherever those things are, and I think you find people aren't that adverse to walking, especially if they have something to look at, to, as they call it, entertain them as they're walking. And I think that's what we have to
Build
try to
on.
provide and build.
And find ways to keep the pedestrians safe as they
Yeah.
cross the
Absolutely.
different
Yeah.
streets. And when you talk about walking, that's where sidewalks around town, we have to focus on that. We've pushed that aside for, I'm going to say, at least 20 years.
Yeah.
And we really have to get back to focusing on where sidewalks need to be. I watched students come home from the middle school on Old Mill Road, and there's a section of Old Mill Road where there's no sidewalk, but yet you have students
Kids walk.
walking there.
Yep.
And not to mention, I have seen more cars go through that flashing light on Maple Ave where the
Oh,
kids,
the new one that
the
says
new
yeah,
flashing
yeah.
light where at the crosswalk. Cars don't even know it's there, and
Yeah.
the light's flashing in their face, and students have pushed the button.
Yeah.
And
Which means you're supposed to stop. and
right,
let them
so
pass, but
the
they don't
students
know.
have to be educated. Just because you've pushed that button, don't trust the cars coming down the hill or going up the hill. And they do it both ways. They just keep going
Yeah.
right through it.
They're not used to it being there. I
Right.
think people aren't even thinking about it.
And I'm wondering, do they need a warning before it?
There's one sign
there?
on either side, but yeah.
I'm wondering if, you know, so many feet before they get to the crosswalk, there needs to be, I don't know. I gasp when I see how many times cars just pass
Yeah.
right through that.
The sidewalks are, somebody who walks, I love to walk, so I walk a lot. I mean, yeah, the sidewalks they're difficult. But those new sidewalks on Main Street are
Main Street
awesome.
are really nice.
You know, that's an example of what
yes.
should be,
Yeah.
because they're wide and they're accessible, and
But you have to
have the
get to
curb
Main
cuts.
Street to use the
Yeah,
crosswalk
right,
because
right.
on the way there's no
there's
sidewalk.
no sidewalk.
So,
Yeah, and we also, you know, we took I think, a pretty comprehensive approach. We actually moved utility poles and everything on Lake Street when we redid it finally finished it off this summer. So, you know, there's sidewalks the full length on the northwestern side, and, you know, so we are really thinking about that more and more every time. And we're, you know, we have the Complete Streets program in place, which is pedestrian-oriented alternative modes of transportation. We're basically sitting just on this side of being able to get $400,000 from the state and accept that for our first project. So we're trying to do that where it makes sense and not create a project in and of itself, but tag it on to one of our other roadway improvement projects where it makes sense. I just don't want to put a bike lane to somewhere if there's no bikers. So
Right, which
Cyclists.
sometimes happens with programs
Yeah,
like that require you to do stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
now, is Lake Street reopened, the length? No?
no, still not in front of where the Beal construction is going on. Although I was up on site yesterday morning, and you can physically see the road getting lower as they're grading it. That won't open until early December.
And so, is there a time where you're going to have Lake Street North and Lake Street South, or North Lake Street and South Lake Street? Because, I mean, you have North Quinsigamon Ave and South Quinsigamon Ave, but Lake Street just extends, and I wonder, you know, for people who aren't familiar with
Right.
those roads, if it would make more sense to do that. The other thing I see, speaking of being on traffic patrol, at Lake and Route 9, if you're coming out of Lake Street North to go left, there's a lower light
Yep.
signal.
With a green arrow.
And one car may stop, and the cars behind it, they don't see that lower light signal. So they're like screeching on their brakes behind the car that sees the signal. And so it gets confusing because I don't think it's high enough for everyone to realize what's happening right there. But that's it for my traffic
That's your-
patrol for now.
That's good. That should be a new show. Traffic
Patrol.
with Donna.
Yeah, you just asked me the routes to the grocery store. I can tell you about the
There you
traffic
go.
there.
There you go.
But West Main Street is really nice. I was just on West Main Street, and it's
That too,
really
West End. Yeah.
very nice.
Yep. Very good. So I don't know. I was going to ask you about Selectmen's meeting, and you talked about pay as you throw.
Yes.
bags.
Excuse me, you watched the select
It
meeting?
was the first one I've watched.
Oh,
The
okay.
first one
Okay.
since I've left, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I wanted to watch the town rezoning discussion. That's why I turned it on. And
Okay.
say, okay,
Yeah.
so pay as you
All
throw.
Pay as you throw.
So speaking of when I was a new selectman, that program started.
Just started,
2007, 2008,
Yep.
whatever that was.
Yep.
So it's been 12 years.
Yep.
And the rates, it's the pay as you throw program itself has been very successful.
Right.
And the rates haven't been raised in
Right.
12 years, and so I know there's
There's
a proposal to do so.
we have done the analysis to kind of set ourselves up for a decision to be made. As you mentioned, the program started in 2008, and it had two real focuses. One was to increase recycling and reduce the amount of trash that went to landfill and went to the incinerator, and help offset some of those costs. So there's a financial incentive to bolster that, where the less bags you had to buy, the cheaper it was for everyone. And so over the last 12 years, we've been fortunate where the split in the revenue model for that program was roughly 50% from the general tax levy and 50% from the revenues from the bags. And what happened after so it's really been about $1.6 to $1.8 million in cost on an annual basis. So that first year of the program, we raised about $900,000. So that was a great savings on the tax rate. Successful program, increased recycling 30 to 40%. And we've been fortunate, through recessions and other matters that occurred during that time period, that the costs have stayed stable. And now we moved into a new collection contract and a new recycling market, and things are different. And so what happened this year in the fiscal 20 budget, which we're in right now, the general tax rate is actually 57% of the revenue, and the pay-as-you-throw bag fees are 43% of the revenue. So not a big deal, but simply put, the dollars that come in for the bags can only be spent on the trash program, but the dollars that are in the general fund can be spent on any municipal program. So the more we pull away from, the tax rate into the trash revenue, the less we can do other things. So it's not about trying to just get more money for the bags. It's about freeing up enough money to be able to provide all the other services that residents want, along with the trash program. So we've, essentially proposed to the Board of Selectmen, who are considering it, and we'll continue to discuss it, and they've asked us to look at a couple more models, raising the cost per bag about 50%. So a high percentage, the impact on the average household that we see would be about $40 a year. It's less than $1 a week, about 78 cents a week. When we average everything out, we sell or produce about 750,000 bags a year. So it's, I feel like was handed a lot of bags that I'm left to hold, to solve some near-term problems, and a lot of those have been rate increases. One of the other things that we need to really do is, so the rate had stayed about 50-50, but we do need to look at it every contract cycle to make sure we don't get too far off.
So the purpose of those bags was not to be revenue producing. And I can tell you that if I'm going to be asked questions, I get asked two questions as I'm scooting around town. One is water, and the other is bags. And people do not want those bags, the cost raised. They're very annoyed to think that you're going to raise the cost of the bags, and they want to know where that money's going to go, which I think is a fair question. Where is that money going to go? Why do you have, if you need to raise taxes, that's one thing. Is this just a sidestep of taxes, or is it really just time to raise the cost of the bags because it's been 12 years and, I don't know, but I think it's a bad idea.
Well, it's
Just
so.
in case you want my opinion.
So here, so here, because you're close to me, I have to say I do want your opinion.
I'll have to,
So
I have to moderate it.
So there's yeah. I mean, there's we do need it. So if we don't raise the bag revenues, then we are not going to be able to provide other services. So as we increase, so the revenue required to run the trash program is now competing against other services, whether that be funding additional firefighters, police officers, doing other capital initiatives, because if the kind of the bright line was make sure that the bags generate 50% of the cost of the trash program, we're no longer there. So every dollar that has to come from the tax rate is something that could have went to some other municipal program.
So for someone who, for the first 50-something years of her life, had free trash, the big step was we were charging for bags, and people were going to pay for the bags.
It was never
now,
free.
if you knew my house,
That's right, it was never
but
free.
free in that we weren't paying for disposal out of our pockets straight. So we don't use a lot of bags in our house because my husband drives me crazy with recycling. He's in the trash fishing things out all the time. So, but it's not, it's funny. I think it's more the principle than the cost. And it's, strangers have asked me about it in the grocery store, for example. And they're very concerned that those trash bags are going to go up. They don't want it to happen.
We had a similar conversation about stormwater, right? So, everyone can
Which people don't understand that
well,
either.
everyone can see the. So we're
The three-legged stool.
yeah, we're
again.
we are bound within. We can
Yeah.
only raise our tax
Right,
revenue
right.
by 2.5% every year.
The
So
stormwater is a mandate.
is a
That's
mandate.
a reflection of a
Yep.
mandate.
Yep.
The trash bags are we managing our money the way we should? Or should we really be charging it for the trash bags? I don't know. I think that people need and deserve a really good, simple, clear explanation as to
Yeah.
why the trash bag cost has to go up.
Yeah, I agree. I think, people need to understand, and you always do your best to help people to understand, because
Right.
a lot of these things are complicated and they don't live in this every day, right? And so, but, I think for me, I can understand if the bag, if you have to increase revenue somewhere, okay, to increase the bag fee, because that money is going directly to the use of, trash, for whatever lack of the word, then I know where that's going. Oh, I have to increase that to keep it, because we have this 50-50 balance. If we want to keep that even, it's getting, so I have to do that. The other reason we did, the town did that with the bags, the incentive for charging and for going that way was to encourage people to recycle. So to put less trash, and as you said, that's now changed. The recycling model, we pay more for that now because it just used to be free, we thought. So yeah, so it's complicated, but again, it's, well, where are you going to take it if you have to? Then the trade, I think it's here. If we don't do this, here's the trade-offs.
Yep.
Raising your bags and paying this extra money is equal to one extra, I don't want to say firefighter because I don't know if that's true,
Yep.
but
Right.
one extra teacher, whatever that is. So it's always that.
So let me haunt your future brain.
Okay.
All right. So every time you drive down the street
Yep.
in Shrewsbury and you
Yep.
see a blue bag, think
Yep.
$3.50.
Yeah.
Because that's what it costs us on average for each bag of trash that sits at the curb.
Okay.
But when you purchase that bag, you're only paying at the most right now $1.75. But our all-in cost to pick it up and to dispose of it at the waste incinerator is $3.50. So
people need to
And that-
squish their
That's the other
bags
way.
more.
Yeah, you do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that
that's-
was the
yeah,
Is
other
it by
part of
weight
it.
or is it by bag?
Well, there's a little bit of it by weight because it's a weight-based outcome whenever we take it to the incinerator, but there is a sunk cost in picking that up and driving around town that is a substantial portion of the cost of our program, about $1.2 million to have the company come and pick it up curbside. So.
It's the thing, you touch on a point, which is residents, we're most aware of those things that we deal with every day. Some of those things are so esoteric, sewer, it's tough to, but when it hits us locally with water and trash is the big thing, because we put it out every week, we take it in, we buy the bags. That's a harder sell, if you will. Yeah.
So I'm trying to watch the clock because I think we really need to talk about water. People are very concerned now because we've heard about the PFAS, if I'm saying it correctly, which is polyfluoroalkyl substances in our water. Now, people are thinking Shrewsbury water is bad because we have this in our water. We don't want it in our water.
Correct.
And so I'd like you to just talk a little bit about the source of it, and that it's not just in Shrewsbury water, it's everywhere. Because I would imagine for all of the products we use in our households that contribute to this contamination, that it's all over the country, all over the world. So what is it, and what can we do about it, and what should we be doing about it? How can we be more proactive? Because recycling is a good thing, but now this is in our water, and why do we know about it now and we didn't know about it before? So I've asked you a few
Sure.
questions.
So first of all, you said proactive, and I think that's exactly what we are being. We're a community that voluntarily tested our drinking water wells to determine if it's in it. So it's bad that we found it, but better to find it today than 5 years when we're forced to test it. And you say, why didn't you test it in 2019 when you had the opportunity to do it? So PFAS, this group of chemicals, it's 100% man-made. It was made by industry for well-intended purposes. It's the main substance that's in a certain type of firefighting chemical foam. So you see a lot of communities that are a little bit ahead of us, Air, Hudson, Devons, and other parts of the community, all have some nexus to an airport or a major firefighting academy or training center. And they just used to use the foam and train and prepare for airline crashes and things like that, and they would just spray it. And it has a very long half-life, so it stays in its form that it's made in for a very long time, and it's a bioaccumulator. It builds up in your system over time, and your body can't get rid of it. So therefore, there's health concerns that are related to it. But
And the acceptable number is 20?
So currently right now, if we were at 70 or higher,
70.
we would be required to notify residents. We're anticipating that number is going to change downwards from 70 to 20 on January 1st. We're at 13.56. And that, we worked with DEP. DEP, has been a good partner with us, and they got us a immediate secondary test to come in and confirmatory test, so we know what we're sure that we knew what we had. As far as where it's coming from, we don't know. It's not like we have a source. It could be tied to a particular site. It may not be. It can be airborne and accumulate because honestly a high-level air system stops, or it could be coming from your traditional smokestack chemical or type of industry that used it very heavily, or
And it's
near
in
an
all our
airport.
wells. It's not
So it's
specific.
one of our wells has the highest concentration, and then every other well has a trace amount. And so we'll talk about the trace amount and then why we know now. So we originally tested for PFAS in 2016, and minimum, the lowest amount a laboratory could test to and identify was at 20 parts per trillion. And now labs, because of science, can analyze water down to almost just a little less than 2 parts per trillion. So the narrowing it down, and because we only have a little bit in our wells, and none of the wells, you know, at least in 2016, were exceeding 20 parts per trillion of what was being tested, we didn't see it. It was non-detect. We looked good, but now, since we're able to test at 2 parts per trillion, we can identify it. So we're adding 5 different of these polyfluoroalkyl substances together to get to the 13.56. So
Now, I have a responsibility as someone on this planet to look at what's in my household and see what I can change. Because if I know it's in some of the products in my home, then I should get rid of those products or switch to something that's green that doesn't contain that. And this is something that if you don't want it in your water, then we should start to look at some of those things. Because you talked about firefighting foam, but in here it says stain and water repellent fabrics.
Oh.
everything
Okay.
that you buy. Yep.
Yeah.
It's in everything. Non-stick products such as Teflon, polishes, waxes, paints, cleaning products, and firefighting foams. And so we all can do something.
Yeah.
We all have a responsibility to do something.
And it's in things that you may not think of. It's the inside lining of the microwave popcorn bag.
Yep.
It's
wow.
it's waxy based paper products that food may go into. It's a non-stick and flame retardant products. So
the what do you call it? What they package food in.
some
food.
waxy type substances. Yeah.
And so it's all around us. So when the students come in to a town meeting and say, we need to look at the styrofoam, we need to really pay close attention now, because hopefully they're going to come back and say we need to look at some of these other products. But I'm sure there are products out there that we can use as alternatives to many of the things that we use. Maybe not for everything, but it's a way to bring that number down. And so we all can do something.
Yeah, and it begs the question as to why we're not hearing more about that
Why
as
haven't
well.
they-
If you
yeah.
if the testing hadn't got to the levels of that, and we weren't voluntary testing, we wouldn't just know about this.
Right.
And how do you know? I mean, you can't look at a label. I can't go home, grab that popcorn bag out of my husband's hand and say, "Don't put it in there because there's PFAS."
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, and at the same time, you don't want to panic, right?
Right.
You want to be responsible, and there's use things wisely, but you're right. I mean, that's, but I think.
And drinking bottled water isn't the answer, because that bottled water comes from somewhere.
Some have
Yeah.
it in
And
it.
somewhere where we don't know what the content
Right.
of PFAS or any other ingredient that's in that bottled water, not to mention the bottle itself. So
Right.
people that are strutting around with their bottled water thinking they're drinking healthier, they're probably not.
Yeah, I mean, DPW Director Jeff Hyland made a statement at town meeting and basically said, if a community doesn't have PFAS in their drinking water wells, it means they haven't tested for it. I mean, we do really think that in certain regions and in certain areas that will be the case. That it's.
Look, I think the key word here is proactive and making a decision that wasn't easy to go out when you didn't have to, but you did.
Yep.
We're going to inform everybody. We're going to, as a community, deal with this, and that's what you do.
So there's a light at the end of the tunnel for PFAS. So we talk about hexchrome and we're piloting systems, and we know we can lower the level of hexchrome. PFAS, seeing our municipal colleagues in Devons and Air and Hudson, who are about 6 months to a year ahead of us, who already have one of 2 types of filtration systems in place, they're going to non-detect levels. So they're essentially removing it all, and they're at much higher levels than we are.
Don't tell me another treatment plant. We've got to build a new
No,
treatment
Can
plant.
our, can our little microbes
Yeah,
eat
no,
this
our
too?
little
No?
our little microbes
No.
can't. So there's two approaches. One's like an ion exchange through a resin-based, and then there's a carbon-based filter that we can use to take it out, but it will be expensive, you know. And so we're looking at this, as I said at town
There's
meeting.
the stool.
Yeah, where do we put it in the line
Little
in
wobbly
the
stool.
system?
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
you put that to the front of the line, and
Yeah.
that's something we can all buy into. But just to stay on water, because we're going to run short on time. You're doing some improvements, and the unidirectional flushing. You're going to be replacing valves all over the place because those valves haven't been touched. But that's not a bad thing, because it'll break today or it'll
Right.
break tomorrow. It could be a controlled break.
Right.
But the unidirectional flushing is an improvement on how you flush the systems right now for the people that are really struggling with the sediment, because you have so many people with the sediment in their water still. The sediment is not unsafe, but it's something no one wants in their water.
Right.
And so what's the town actually doing? Would
Yeah,
you like to explain that?
Yeah, so we are using this unidirectional hydrant flushing program, which is basically a hydrological or scientific approach to your plain old opening up a hydrant and letting the water flow out. So you have to maintain certain pressures within your system and certain velocities of the water that are flowing through the pipes in order to be effective with the flushing. So it's more employee staff hours, it's more use of the valves throughout the system than the other flushing, so it will be more costly. So we put funding in place as part of a water quality improvement package to be able to do this, and we're waiting for our bid results to come back in, and then we're going to move as quickly as we can this fall before the weather turns too cold and we're worried about icing from our flushing. We are flushing dead ends right now. So if you live on a cul-de-sac or live off of a main artery, off of Maple, off of Main, we are doing some flushing there to, just remove sediment that accumulates at the end of mains. But we are going to take a different approach to cleaning our mains from here on out.
What can people do that have had a problem and had to flush their water for like 2 hours?
Well, the Board of Selectmen actually at their next to last meeting approved a water abatement policy. So if you've had ongoing problems for quite some time, please contact us and we can see if we can work on an abatement to reduce some of that cost that you've had to literally flush down the drain to get your lines clear. We can work backwards with you from the installation of the new plant back to last November. We'll be happy to do that. And
So they should call who?
the
Water department?
water department in the town hall, DPW.
Okay. I just need to cover a couple of things quickly, and you're going to have to come back because we didn't get anywhere. Good luck to you.
Yeah.
The Garden Club, we have to acknowledge the Garden Club. They've done an incredible job with all their plantings
Yep.
through the medians, and I just commend them for the beautiful work they did. And I'm going to give a little advertisement here, and it really doesn't have to do with the fact that my son, Kevin, is the coach of this team. It's that I actually was present and saw it for myself. My son, Kevin, is the coach of the Unified basketball team. And I went to the first game last week, and I came out of that building, and my face hurt because I realized I was still smiling. I have never seen so much kindness and goodwill in one room. So there's special needs students that play on this team, and then there's partners. And so it's the other students in the school that partner up with these special needs students. And when the other team came in, they were treated so well, and they were treated like if they scored a basket, we applauded for them. Now, I'm competitive.
Yeah.
Who applauds?
Right, yeah.
Who applauds
Yeah.
for the other team? And we did, and it was with excitement. It wasn't just a phony applaud.
Yeah.
And everybody was there cheering for all of the kids that were on that court. And it was unbelievable. And when I complimented different people like the athletic director, they all said it's the best thing we have in the school. It's the best thing we have. And people need to know that there is so much goodness in that school. It's not, when you see on the news all the bad things that happen, there's so much goodness. And that was a classic example of it. It was just, and it was teaching the other team. There were 40 kids from Shrewsbury on this team. The other team I counted 12. Now it's their first year. But they had so much that they had to have learned just watching how this all went down, and the sportsmanship and the goodwill. It was beautiful. Like, it just made me want to be a good person.
Yeah, there is a lot of good.
Assembly.
There's a lot of good.
Yeah.
A lot of good in the community. A lot of good in our school. You're right. It's good to take a moment to recognize
So
it.
I had to talk about that. Sorry, Kevin. But now I can go back to letting you ask a couple questions.
Do I have time? I still have time? Okay. So one of the things I was going to ask you about was the police station, the complex. I think you've got funding for a study, or the study has started. I forget.
Well, yeah, so we did, town meeting appropriated $250,000, and we got a $50,000 earmarked through the state budget process, and we've selected an owner's project manager, which is the first step in that process, and we've advertised now, and RFQs will be available on the 30th to select an architect. So we'll be selecting an architect within the first few weeks of December at the latest, and then we'll really begin a feasibility study, which will take us 6 to 8 months to kind of identify the exact location of where a new police station would go, what other work would be done at the town hall and senior center, and have a cost estimate and other things for the town to consider at that time about moving forward with that project.
Okay, so this is really kind of expanded into municipal, not just police, looking at
That's right.
needs at the other municipal buildings. But the new building, if you will, will only be police.
That's
That'll be
correct.
their dedicated building.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only slight change would be enhanced communications. So we currently dispatch police and fire separately. So we want to consider, or at least not preclude that at any point in the future. But we've also kind of expanded conversations to say, well, all of our utilities are 24 hours, water, sewer, Celco. So we have that economy. Do we have more of like a communications center within that building? Because everything right now is piecemeal. And that would give us, really 24/7 access for residents to know one number to call, in a non-emergency situation.
And then what, if you can talk about what kind of additions or improvements would be at the senior center?
Yeah, so we're going to go through a really comprehensive programming study with an architect to one, find out where the bumps have been over the last few years. Like, what programs aren't we able to offer? What are seniors looking for? Where have the sticking points been? And, what are the popular times? And, does that require an addition? Or is it more of just reorganizing that space in that building that was constructed almost 20 years ago now, and just because there's a different and better model. So, and kind of the same thing for the town hall. As you both know, we're pretty tight in there. There's no offices that sit vacant. We have 3 or 4 conference rooms that are very rarely vacant. That may be one other thing that we could put into the new building as conferencing space, and then build out in our existing building where there's conference space to be offices. So that's something that we'll look at as well.
And the amazing thing was, the argument was, do we really need a senior center back then? And I can remember talking to the town manager at the time was Mr. Carney, and saying, build it and they will come. And don't worry, if nobody shows up, you have more municipal space.
Right, it's true. That's a
but
win.
it was so unknown, and it was immediately a great place.
Yeah, it's a huge asset for what they do in the building, and then for what the Council on Aging is able to do for people outside who don't actually access the facility but use the services.
Right.
services there. So, and speaking of, space and people, maybe a little update on reorganization, because that was when you came on,
Right.
the town manager, that was something certainly the Board of Selectmen supported, and you did things like creating the DPW, and so how's that all?
It's all working
panning
out very well. I'm very pleased that, so DPW is about a year old now, and we have all the staff in place. We're still doing a little bit of forming and norming and getting, all the right processes in place, but, we're back up to full staffing. We had the retirements, all of the positions have been backfilled, the new positions have been filled. No surprises on the cost side of it. We laid that out well. Everything, came in at budget, and the adding of the staff that we did and the individual people that we have, whether it's Dan Rowley, Keith Baldinger, coming back to the organization, or it's, Jeff Highland, Andy Truman, Angela Snell, Kevin Esposito, Ryan Pontebrand, taking new roles, Nick Rapecta taking new roles, Ed Hayes. Everyone has really stepped up and created this new DPW, and they have a synergy. They're a group. They're building themselves together, and then having an HR coordinator with all that turnover and orchestrating all that's been a huge blessing. So, but it's working out rather well, and we're taking the next steps. We had a good conversation with the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday, setting goals, performance measures, performance appraisal of staff.
You did that?
New class and comp plan. See, lightning.
Kudos to you. Yeah. That's good. That's good, a step in the right. Because I was going to ask you how that, did you realize the efficiencies you thought?
Yeah.
And because it was great, the model was it wasn't, this wasn't a huge increase in budget to do this. It was
wasn't.
just reorganizing and, like you said, taking advantage of retirements and using it. So that's good to hear. And we have a second just on that note. Sad that our library director, Ellen Dolan, is retiring.
She's got nerve, huh?
I know. Yeah, exactly. Huge hole that'll leave,
Yeah.
and then again. But that's how it goes. And congratulations to her. She's been amazing.
She really has.
You have about 15 seconds to tell us about Triple E.
So we're
No frost yet?
Yeah, we're waiting for 4 hours of 28 degrees so we can be done with it for this year.
No kidding. I'm using my fire pit.
So people still need to be careful.
Yeah, you still need to be careful. We need
Yeah.
that first hard frost, and then we can release evening activities, et cetera. And we will do that once we know that happens.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a quick hour once again. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.